Hey, what's happening, everybody? It's me, Rocco, again. And thanks for coming back to my channel. I really appreciate it. Today, we're going to be continuing on with the Rush album review series, number 16. Holy shit, guys. We're getting to the final stretch here. And today, we're going to be talking about 1996's Test for Echo. This is an infamous album, guys. You know, at first, when it came out, it was pretty well received. The fans seemed to like it. But over the years, it's come to be regarded as one of the worst Rush albums, if not the worst. I've seen this one put down really low. I've seen Presto. I've seen Hold Your Fire. Really, those three albums are the ones that get really shit on by fans. And, you know, I gotta be honest. I was one of those people. I used to think this album was so bland, so uninspired, and just a stale Rush album, which seems to be like the major complaint. It's just a stale, overlong, uninspired Rush album, which is kind of sad because, you know, this band was so great. And coming off Counterparts, that was such a fantastic album, one of their best, definitely one of their best of their later period. And then they came out with this one, and it kind of just lost the momentum. But now, over the years, I've softened my opinion a lot on it. You know, there are some great songs in here. Again, I mentioned in the last video, there's nuggets. There's nuggets of greatness. I'd say 5 out of the 11 songs on this album, or 10, there's either 10 or 11, I can't remember, which is a lot, are great, okay? They're fantastic songs, Rush classics. Unfortunately, the rest of the songs aren't that good, and there's like 1 or 2 stinkers. Now, the thing is, between this and Presto, I gotta say I like this album quite a bit better than Presto, because there's less stinkers than Presto. This album has more mediocre, stale songs. Presto had songs that I actually kind of disliked. So that's the main difference. So I'd still rate this album above Presto. And I like how they continued powering forward with their hard rock, guitar-driven sound. But yeah, overall, not a horrible album. Just for Rush standards, a very stale one. And it's kind of sad, but, you know, I'm really going to try to highlight the great songs on this album because they're there. Just like Presto, there's a few songs that if you just want to extract those and put them on a playlist, you got a great, like, 20 to 30-minute EP to go off of, instead of listening to the full 55-minute overblown kind of mess that is Test for Echo. And another thing is, this album came out in 1996, so of all the Rush albums that could have came out the year I was born, we get Test for Echo. So there we go. I just dated myself a bit, but yeah, you know, of course, the worst Rush album came out the year I was born. I always found that funny. But yeah, so first time I heard this album, it was can't really remember. It was at least like 4 to 5 years ago, so pretty recently compared to the rest of the Rush canon. And to be honest, I haven't really revisited it very much throughout the years. I think I've heard this album I wouldn't say I've heard this album more than like 10 times. So to make this review, I really had to like give it some more attention, some really in-depth listening. And it paid off because songs that I enjoyed from the past, I enjoyed a whole lot more. And songs that I disliked, I was sitting there thinking like, you know what? This isn't horrible. It's a little stale, but it's not horrible. So I think if you stick with it, you will find something to love on Test for Echo. And there are a lot of highlights. So it's going to be a pleasure to get into that. But for now, let's talk about the history behind the album because it's quite interesting. So as we all know, Counterparts came out in 1993. This is 96, so a lot of time went by between Counterparts and this one. Probably the longest gap between albums, and yeah, definitely their longest gap. And basically, what happened was Geddy Lee, he had a kid, he had a daughter, and I don't know how old Geddy Lee would have been at this point. Probably in his like 40s, his late 40s, early 50s. Let's see, he's probably like sick in his mid. Anyway, fuck it, I can't do math in my head right now, but it was, you know, like a late father. I think he had kids. He obviously had kids from before, but from the same marriage, I believe. And he wanted to just spend a year with his daughter, like the first year of her life. What a great guy, you know, being like such a prolific musical figure. You know, you would think like, oh, he has to go on tour, but no, he wanted to stay home and spend time with his family. And I think Rush were always those kind of people that really enjoyed taking the time off and spending time with their family. You know, they weren't like boning groupies and fucking, you know, whores and shit like that. They were family men. So really another reason to respect Rush. They had the morals to back up their musical credibility, unlike a lot of other bands that are just full of scumbags. And when you listen to their music, it's great, but you can't help but think like, fuck, these guys are assholes. A few bands come to mind, but I'm not going to mention any names. But yeah, so they took 18 months off, and then when they finally got back together, things were looking up. I should mention that they did go on tour for Counterparts. It was a good tour. Again, there was a lot of tension on that tour, according to Geddy Lee, between him and Lifeson, because of the whole keyboard thing. But now in this album, when they went to record this album, or I should say when they went to write this album, it was really relaxed, and their spirits were high, and they were just having a good time. They were just having fun with it. The problem was Alex Lifeson, he had this feeling in the pit of his stomach that this was going to be the last Rush album. Again, at this point, 1996, they'd been together for about 20 years, even longer, with Neil Peart. Of course, Lee and Lifeson had been in Rush since like the late 60s as their own kind of like unit there. But yeah, Alex Lifeson couldn't help but shake off this feeling that, maybe they were getting a little bit past their prime. And, that's not a good mindset to go in with this album. So maybe that mindset, this is just a theory, he never really stated this, kind of went into the making of this album and kind of made it, a little bit stale. But who knows? But according to Lifeson, once they got into the swing of things, all those feelings just kind of dropped down to the wayside, and they just got into it, and they just had a good time. But, you can't help but think, that can't be a good sign, going into an album thinking, like, I have a feeling this is going to be your last album. So, and Alex Lifeson has been known to exaggerate over the years. When he mentioned that Grace Under Pressure was a guitar-driven album and, like, shit like that, like random. This guy isn't reliable, but I love the dude, but he isn't a reliable, he's not really consistent with his opinions. So who knows? And I guess I should mention what was going on in those years between the Counterparts tour and the making of this album. Some pretty funny stuff. First of all, Alex Lifeson released a solo album called Victor. It was kind of an anonymous album. He didn't release it as him writing it, as in Alex Lifeson, which is pretty funny because, you wouldn't really think it would be popular anyway. Sure, he's in a popular rock band, but usually a guitarist making a solo album never really cracks onto the scene like an actual album from that band. And to make it anonymous is even funnier. It's like he was going for like the fucking bare minimum of commercial viability. And I still have to hear that album. It's my friend heard it. He said it's pretty interesting. I got to give it a listen because I've heard a lot of like good things about it, and I heard it's really weird. So that should be really entertaining. But yeah. And okay, and then Neil Peart, here's the funny thing. He actually he did this Buddy Rich tribute show. Buddy Rich being this famous jazz drummer from the 50s. And other decades as well, one of the highest regarded drummers of all time. And Geddy Lee did this tribute show for him, and to prepare and practice, he trained with the legendary jazz drummer Freddie Gruber, who basically changed Neil Peart's whole opinion on his whole outlook on drumming. Totally changed his grip to a traditional grip, and they did that, and he carried on that technique with Rush. I wouldn't really say it made a difference. Like, I'm not hearing any difference in Neil Peart's drumming technique. But, if it helped him out, apparently it made him a little more dynamic. Then, who am I to say? But, yeah, some pretty interesting stuff happened in those years. And, unfortunately, after this album, I don't want to get into it in this video, but we all know what happened with Neil Peart. Just absolutely tragic events occurred in his life. But at least he was kind of living it up before those events happened, with the whole Buddy Rich thing. And that must have been really, really interesting for him. A real nice change of pace. So anyway, they got back together and they started recording the album. As I mentioned, spirits were high. Everyone was having a great time. And they were on a roll, apparently. Geddy Lee and Alex Lifeson, they kind of wrote 6 songs in a row without presenting any ideas to Neil Peart because they didn't want to disrupt that kind of creativity. And it's kind of funny to think that a lot of these songs are some of the most uninspired Rush songs that you can't help but laugh because, they're making it sound like they had this burst of creativity that just came out of nowhere. And yet the songs are so uninspired, in general. So that's really funny. And they also kind of changed their whole songwriting technique on this album. Usually they would get pieces of music and kind of fit it to the lyrics, but here they were fitting the lyrics to the music. So they kind of switched that up. I don't know why they did that, but I don't think it had an impact on the album. It's just kind of a cool little tidbit of information. And yeah, so the writing sessions were pretty productive. I think they finished a month early or 3 weeks early or something like that. And they got Peter Collins back to produced the album. So went back into the studio. Peter Collins, again, a fine job with the production. Can't complain. And yeah, they released the album. It went all the way to number 5 on the Billboard chart. So pretty good. Not as good as Counterparts, but not bad. And it was met with some pretty good critical acclaim. So really, it's been over the years that this album's been criticized. At first, it wasn't hated whatsoever. It's just, I guess, as the years go by, you kind of you don't really revisit the album, and that's what makes you realize, oh, it's probably a weaker one. But yeah, I'm trying to see if I'm missing anything about the history here. No, that's pretty much it. Apparently, there was a lot of snow in 1996. It was a very snowy winter. So the snowy atmosphere where they were recording in New York kind of inspired them to create the album cover with the Inukshuk on it, a Canadian symbol. So very Canadian album. And if you look closely, there's these mini... it's actually a giant Inukshuk because you see these tiny little figures kind of peppering the base of the Inukshuk. So pretty cool. I always like the album cover. It's nothing amazing, but it's decent. So that's pretty much the making of Test for Echo. Nothing really that interesting behind it, but, a few notable things. Alright guys, so now let's just get into my overall review of Test for Echo, which is going to be pretty brief, to be honest, because honestly, it really hinges on a few key factors. This album here, how does it compare to Counterparts? That's the first thing you got to think of. When I review these albums, I always like to compare it to what came before, because that just really goes to show, it's just a really striking comparison, because if you were listening to this album at the time, you were just coming fresh off Counterparts, and that's a big factor. I mean, if you're listening to it now, you can listen to any album out of order in any sequence, and that definitely could impact your enjoyment of the album. But you got to put yourself in the shoes of those people who were listening to Counterparts. They had that album for 3 years, and now Test for Echo comes out. So what were they thinking? Why did this album satisfy those people at the time? Because it did sell well, people did like it. Now here's the thing: it definitely continues the hard rock edge of Counterparts. Now, the thing is, this album here is nowhere near as heavy as Counterparts. Counterparts had some absolutely crushing riffs. And the thing about Counterparts, it had some amazing emotional moments. The ballads on Counterparts, if you can even call them ballads, like Nobody's Hero, Cold Fire, it's debatable. Everyday Glory, they were emotional. They really tugged at your heartstrings. And the heavy moments hit really hard. Now, this album here has the same formula, but here's the thing. It's less heavy. So it tries to be heavy, but it's less heavy. The riffs are less memorable. And the emotional songs that are trying to be emotional, with the exception of maybe 1 or 2 songs, kind of fall flat, okay? So it's really just a watered down version of Counterparts. That's the best way I can describe it. It's like if Counterparts was I don't know, just picture the greatest beer you can imagine. You go to Germany during Oktoberfest, and you get this fucking amazing, good quality beer. And then the next day you go to Mexico and you're drinking a Corona. It's that kind of, I don't know if you guys drink beers, but that's the best analogy I can come up with at the moment. But it's just a watered down version of Counterparts, because they really aren't trying anything new on this album. And then that's why people could think it's stale, because it's so similar to Counterparts in structure. And again, there's 10 to 11 songs on it, which is really long. And again, the CD era, yada, yada, yada. I talked about this at length, starting with the Hold Your Fire review, how Rush started cramming all these songs in. I'm not going to get into that again, but there's a lot of filler. And they had a bad habit of really putting the best songs at the beginning and the end, kind of bookending the album, and then the meat and potatoes of the album being kind of weak. And this album here is no exception. Again, on Counterparts, they kind of do that, but even the weaker songs on Counterparts aren't bad, but the weaker songs on this album kind of verge on being pretty bad to mediocre. So again, a very just watered down version of Counterparts. That's all I can say about it. And now here's the thing: the ballads. There's a few really standout tracks. The title track, Test for Echo, Driven, what do you call it? Resist. They're all fantastic. Even songs like Time and Motion and what else was on there? One of the earlier tracks. I forget the name at the moment, but those songs are pretty good too. So even the middle of the road songs are pretty decent. But then you got all the songs in the middle, like Totem, and even the instrumental Limbo. It's not bad, but for a Rush instrumental, it's not it's just, it doesn't do anything for me. It feels like a bunch of recycled bullshit, basically. I don't know. It's just my opinion. But yeah, that's pretty much all I gotta say about the album. And good thing this didn't end up being Rush's album, because it could have. Again, with the tragic events that happened in Neil Peart, this could have easily have been the last Rush album recorded. That would have been sad. Again, Vapor Trails, when I make the review for that, I definitely got to listen to that more in depth, because I can't really remember if I liked Vapor Trails better than this album. I think I did. It was a little heavier, a little darker, but I could be wrong on that. So I don't know. As it stands, this is my second least favorite Rush album, and yeah, so that's pretty much all I got to say about it. So now let's just talk about each song track by track.
Don't touch that dial. We're in denial until the showcase trial on TV.
Kickstarting the album, guys, we got the track Test for Echo, the title track. And you know what's interesting? It's been a while since Rush had a title track on an album. If you think about it, pretty much since Presto, so a few albums ago, so I guess not that long ago, but there was no title track for Hold Your Fire, Power Windows, Grace Under Pressure, Signals, Moving Pictures, Permanent Waves. Holy shit, the further I think about it, like, they barely had any title tracks. I guess just Fly By Night, that 2112, obviously, Farewell to Kings. Okay, there was a few, but anyway, I just went on a mini rant there. But yeah, Test for Echo, I don't think anyone's going to argue that this is a great song. It's about 6 minutes in length, which is a little bit lengthy for the amount of material it contains. But overall, it's a great song. Starts off pretty laid back, and you don't really know what's coming. Then all of a sudden, this frantic riff comes in, and this is a really great riff, and I think it really makes the song. This is what really gives the song that edge. And it's a pretty heavy song. It's a pretty rip-roaring riff, if that makes any sense. Pretty bombastic, pretty frantic. And it's a really dynamic track. It goes back and forth between kind of laid-back sections and upbeat sections. So pretty much for 6 minutes, going back and forth between those two, it can get a little bit long at points. And, I feel like this song maybe should have been like 4.5 minutes. They could have trimmed a bit here and there. But overall, it's a really good song. I love when that riff kicks in. It's just so in your face, and it really shows that Rush were really continuing with that hard rock, guitar-driven sound. So the title track, Test for Echo, it's a great song, one of the highlights on the album. It's not my favorite. It's probably my third favorite or fourth favorite track on the album, but definitely a highlight. So I would give this song easily probably between an 8 to an 8.5 out of 10, so pretty high score. Yeah, I love the track Test for Echo. It's a great track. Great way to open the album. A little bit of false hope there with the quality of this thing, but I like it. And yeah, another thing I should mention about this track before we go to the next one is the lyrics. They collaborated with Pi Dubois on this song, and lyrically it's a pretty interesting track. It talks about, how crime and all these kind of things are kind of sensationalized on TV, how, like, crime has become, like, an entertainment source. So pretty interesting lyrics there. I like when Geddy Lee sings "Gangsta Nation." It's pretty funny just hearing Geddy Lee say the word "gangsta." So pretty meaningful track. You know what? To be honest with you, I don't really know what "Test for Echo" has to do with it, like the phrase "Test for Echo," but I like the lyrics. So again, pretty good track in the 8 to 8.5 range.
Driven to the margin of error, driven to the edge of control, driven to the margin of terror, driven to the edge of a deep dark hole.
Alright guys, track number 2, Driven. This song here, I mentioned, like, take a few songs from this album, make a nice EP, put this song at the fucking forefront, because this song is a Rush classic. It's an absolute classic, and it proves that, although they might have been a little bit uninspired at this point, given, like, the overall quality of the album, they were still capable of making a fucking phenomenal track. Driven is an amazing track, arguably the best song on the album. Actually, yeah, it's probably, like, the best or the second best. It's just a fantastic song. Honestly, it starts off with this amazing riff. I mean, the riff of this track just grabs you. I know I say this like on every single song, but it grabs you by the balls. It really keeps your attention. And it's a really frantic, really relentless riff that just keeps driving and driving and driving. And really, that's the whole name of the song. It really feels like you're progressing forward. Like this song is just chugging along, the riff is just chugging along, and you're just moving along with it, like you're along for the ride. It's a fantastic riff. And the bass playing, oh my god, guys, the bass playing on this track is just incredible. In fact, when they would play this song live, this was actually a Geddy Lee bass showcase. Like he would go all out on this song, and you could really tell from the playing that the bass is really driving the song. And I use the word driving like in the most literal sense because the song is about, it's about taking the driver's seat. It's about taking action and really taking accountability for your actions, I guess. That's my interpretation of it, but oh man, it's just such a motivational song. And I love how it just seamlessly transitions between acoustic and electric sections. When Geddy Lee's singing, "It's my turn to drive," you got that acoustic guitar in the background, and then it just goes headlong. It's that heavy riff. Man, amazing. There's also this really nice midsection, really heavy, really laying it on the line with the intensity during the midsection of the song. So yeah, Driven, top notch. And what I love about this song, it doesn't go on too long. It's like 4.5 minutes or so. That's the perfect length. If they made this song like 6-7 minutes, it would have been too long. Kind of like Test for Echo. It's the perfect length, and it's a real winner on the album. So Driven, easily an 8.5 out of 10. Easily. Maybe even a 9 at some points. There's a song later on in the album that I would definitely give a 9 out of 10, but this song here is just close enough. So yeah, Driven, classic track, and definitely don't miss out on this one.
Half the world lives, half the world makes, half the world gives, while the other half takes.
So then we got track number 3, Half the World. And this is where the cracks start appearing on the album. This is the first song where, after two pretty solid, pretty straightforward, well, I shouldn't say straightforward, but, pretty solid, pretty great Rush songs, we get a mediocre Rush song. And this one here, it's okay. I kind of like the message behind the song, where it's like you have half the people of the world doing one thing and half the people doing another. But honestly, it's kind of an irritating song. Like Geddy Lee repeats the words "half the world" too many times. And, not to blame Geddy Lee, because obviously he's not writing the lyrics, it's Neil Peart. But it's just kind of irritating to hear the same thing repeated over and over again. That's just a general criticism with any song, but especially this one here. And, it's an okay song. It's not that bad, but, Alex Lifeson uses this, like, instrument called the mandala or something like that. And it kind of gives it this Eastern kind of vibe to it, which, I don't know, I don't really think it fits with the song. It's nowhere near as heavy as Driven or Test for Echo, and it just kind of goes by, and I don't know, apparently they released this song as a single, but I don't think this song should have been a single. It's not that great. So really just a mediocre song on the album. Nothing really I could say about it. You barely even notice the mandala at some points. Like, there's some points where it comes in, and you're like, okay, they're going for like that Eastern kind of feel, but overall, just not a great song. Probably like a 7 out of 10 at best. So yeah, that's Half the World.
Don't have an explanation for another lonely night.
Okay, guys, so I'm heading out to work soon, but I think I can review a few more tracks before I gotta go, because I just heard Test for Echo, it's fresh in my mind, and I think we should get on with the show. So basically, the next song, track 4, is called The Color of Right. Now, this song here, it's a pretty forgettable Rush song. Again, I can't claim to, I haven't heard the album more than like 10, 15 times. Well, now I've heard it about 15 times, but before making this review, as I mentioned, probably heard it 10 times max. But it's just not a song that really sticks in your mind. But when you listen to it, it's enjoyable. It's a thoroughly enjoyable track. And it's a pretty cool guitar riff, actually. Just the way it opens up kind of doesn't remind me of Alex Lifeson whatsoever. Funnily enough, it actually kind of reminds me of the opening of You Shook Me All Night Long by AC/DC. I don't know what it is. I guess just the chords, or I'm no musician, so I can't really describe it, but it has that feel. And then it breaks into this pretty cool melodic riff, the and I think that riff is basically the main reason anyone would ever come back to this song. But overall, it's a pretty cool song. You put it on in the background, it's not offensive. And it's actually quite enjoyable when you listen to it. But it's not really, there's nothing really there to make you want to come back frequently, other than that main riff, which is pretty cool. And yeah, overall, it's a pretty laid back song. It starts off pretty climactic, pretty grandiose, and you think it's gonna be this epic kind of song. But then it gets kind of laid back. The chorus is pretty chill, and Geddy Lee's vocals overall don't really have too much power to them in a good way. Like it doesn't need it. It's just a chilled song. Overall, I like it better than Half the World. Definitely not as good as Driven or Test for Echo, but it's a decent song. It's a song that if the rest of the album was as good as this track, I think this album would have had a little bit more praise to it than what it gets. But there's a few crappy ones coming up. So yeah, Color Right, I'd probably give this a 7.5 out of 10. It's one of those songs that's good, but nothing great.
The mighty ocean dances with the moon. The silent forest echoes with the moon.
Okay, guys, so this next track here, Time and Motion, is the third out of the 4 hidden gems on this album. This is another fantastic Rush song. Just like Test for Echo, just like Driven, this is an upper echelon, late career Rush song. And it's an interesting one at that. It's really atmospheric, really dark, really moody, really actually like hypnotic at points. And kind of takes you by surprise because, the song before this was kind of lightweight. The song before that, Half the World, it was a little, boring. This one here really grabs you, and it's really interesting. The thing about this song is that it was actually a leftover from Counterparts. It was just, they basically put a few unused ideas together that they had from Counterparts and pieced together this track. And it really shows because this definitely could have been on Counterparts. If I was listening to Counterparts and they just snuck this song in, I wouldn't notice any difference in the flow of the album or anything like that. It just belongs on Counterparts. But, here on Test for Echo, it's just a reminder of how great that album was and how this album's kind of like a watered down version of it. But yeah, Time and Motion, really interesting song. And I like how it really utilizes its whole 5-minute runtime. It never feels overlong. It always feels like the band's doing something interesting. And it just kind of puts you in this trance at some points. So the specifics behind the song are pretty cool. It opens up with this riff that just comes right in. It's a heavy ass riff. That dun, 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 dun. It's like, holy shit, where is this coming from? And then keyboards come in, and not overbearing, but the song does have a fair amount of keyboard presence on it, giving it this kind of atmospheric vibe, but never really overbearing like in the late 80s period of Rush. And it's a pretty awesome groove. I mean, it has this kind of almost like nightmarish kind of quality to it. The song's more about like the atmospherics than the actual virtuosity of the playing. So if you want to just listen to a creepy kind of, maybe not creepy, but a dark, menacing Rush song, this one's for you. And I really love the middle section of the album. It really shows the dynamics that this band can put forward. It alternates between that original riff, the dun, 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 and this really cool kind of laid back section. And Geddy Lee singing over it, and it gives you chills sometimes, honestly. I love that contrast. The heavy to light. Oh, man. And I don't know what he says, but it sounds like he says echoes with the moon or dances with the loon or something. And that always just evokes imagery of like a cold, snowy night by a lake and just seeing like wild animals like scurrying by. I don't know. That's just the feeling I get. So yeah, really atmospheric song. Time and Motion is definitely an underrated classic, easily an 8.5 out of 10. And I don't say that lightly. Maybe over the years it'll even grow on me a bit more. But right now, 8.5 out of 10 is a really solid score. So, love this track.
Angels and demons dancing in my head, lunatics and monsters underneath my bed, media messiahs preying on my fears.
So, for the next track, we got Totem. This one here, guys, I'm sorry. For me, it's just a snooze fest. There's really nothing I even remotely like about this song. Okay, maybe there's a few things here and there, but overall as a Rush track, this is this has got to be one of my least favorites. I just don't like the way the song starts off. The vocals really come in a little bit too soon. I would have liked more of a build up to it, and it has this overly kind of sappy, happy kind of feel. But the lyrics are talking about all this religious stuff, and there's some pretty dark and poignant lyrics on this track. So I really think the music and the tone of Geddy Lee's voice doesn't really fit with this song is trying to say. Especially there's points where he says angels and demons dancing beneath my bed, lunatics and monsters, or the other, I don't know, something like that. So some pretty dark imagery going on, but an overly poppy, overly happy kind of feel to it. So I hate when there's always a mismatch between the lyrics and the vocals. Maybe I'm just overthinking it, but for me, the song doesn't do it for me. And there's a lot of like Geddy Lee kind of scat singing going on there, and not that it's bad or anything, but it just gives the song like this extra kind of touch of cheese, and it doesn't really do it for me, guys. Totem, I'd say like it's probably like a 6.5 to a 7 out of 10, somewhere in that range. Just one of my least favorite Rush songs. And yeah, I got nothing much else to say about it. There is a part later in the song, to be fair, where the guitar does kind of, grab your attention for a bit, but it's like a fleeting moment of goodness. Like it just comes and goes so fast, and then you're back to that poppy chorus again. So kind of a wasted opportunity.
In a dog's life, a year is really more like 7. And too soon, a canine will be chasing cars in doggy heaven.
Just got back from work, guys, and hold on one second. I'm gonna have to do this before talking about this next track. All right, that's better, because we're talking about Dog Years, widely regarded as one of the worst Rush songs of all time, if not the worst. And, normally I would say something, I'd be contrarian and say, but you know what, it's still good or whatever. But I can't say that about Dog Years. This song really is one of the worst Rush songs. The thing is, I will say this, I still kind of enjoy hearing it from time to time, because it's just funny. It cracks me up sometimes. But as a serious listening experience, no way, guys. No way in hell am I going to sit down and listen to Dog Years in depth. I mean, this track here, it's a tongue-in-cheek song, but, so was I Think I'm Going Bald, and that song's actually pretty good. This song here, it's tongue-in-cheek, but it's just bad, and it just goes on way too long. And it's basically Rush's attempt, their musical attempt at least, at making a punk rock tune. And that's two reasons why I shouldn't like it. Because obviously the lyrics, we all know the lyrics of the song are some of the worst. And that says a lot for a genius like Neil Peart. But again, he wasn't trying. It was just a fucking tongue-in-cheek track. But the music itself, being based on the punk rock genre, or at least to some extent being inspired by it, that's another turnoff for me. Because as you guys may or may not know, I am not a fan of the punk rock genre whatsoever. If you like it, that good for you. Like, fuck, I wish I could like it. I just don't. It's one of my least favorite genres of all time. I think I like rap better than punk rock. But yeah, so it's just those two factors right there, the cheesy lyrics, the punk rock kind of vibe, just does not sit well with me. I'd probably give this song like a 5 point. No, that's too harsh, because it's still Rush. Like, there's still, it's still solid rock music, so I can't give it that low. Maybe like a 6. I'd give it a 6 out of 10. Because I gotta remember, like a 5 out of 10 is like shit, so I can't give it that. But yeah, it's just a really strange song. The lyrics, what can you say about the fucking lyrics? There's a line where, they say, I wish I was a turtle on the Galapagos or a span of geological time. What the fuck does that even mean? So yeah, Dog Years, just stay away from this one, guys. It's one of the worst Rush songs.
Like a shipwrecked mariner, adrift on an unknown sea.
This next track here is another one that a lot of people seem to really hate, Virtuality. And to be honest with you, I don't really have a problem with this one, guys. For the most part, I think this is a pretty solid Rush track. Sure, it's not one of the greatest, but I do like it, and I like how it has this really heavy, grungy opening riff that kind of goes throughout the entire song. It's a really good riff. I'm not gonna lie. Sorry, I had to sing it there. I couldn't resist. It's really powerful, really grungy. You could definitely see like the '90s influence kind of creeping into Alex Lifeson's playing there. Again, something that would have fit in perfectly on the Counterparts album. But we have it here. And the thing about this track that I'm not really a huge fan of is when that chorus comes in and it's really poppy, really lightweight. It kind of takes away from the heaviness that the song kind of starts off with. And I'm not against being dynamic. Like being dynamic is always fantastic, but it's a little too much on the cheesy side. It's not really like the worst chorus of all time, but it does kind of feel a little bit, like net girl, net boy, send your signal around the world. It's a little cheesy, to be honest, and kind of a lost opportunity to make the song a little bit heavier, a little bit darker. Again, musically, the song's actually pretty good. Nothing I can really complain about. They're not trying to be punk rock, thank God, like fucking Dog Ears. But I think this song could have had more meat to it. Overall, it's not bad, and I really do enjoy that main riff. So I'm going to give this one a 7.5 out of 10. So actually pretty decent score.
I can learn to compromise anything but my desires. I can learn to get along with all the things I can't explain.
Now this tune here is the fourth hidden gem on the album. And you know what, maybe I shouldn't call this one a hidden gem, because it does have its fair share of fans. Actually, a lot of people seem to really connect to this song, really have an emotional resonance with it. And I could definitely see that. This is by far one of the best songs on the album. It's pretty much the emotional, heartfelt ballad on the album. On the last one, Counterparts, we had the fantastic Nobody's Hero. On Roll the Bones, we had Ghost of a Chance, Bravado. So actually two really good ones there. On Presto, we had The Pass. So really, these 90s albums... Wait, Presto was 89. Anyway, let's count it anyway. But these 90s albums really seem to have at least one really emotional, really heartfelt track. And this seems to be the one on this album. And I can't say that this is my favorite of those tracks. It's probably my least favorite, but just by a small margin. It's still a very good song, really emotional. Again, there's electric components to it, acoustic components, some great piano playing. And it's just a really nice emotional ballad. To be honest, I don't really know what it's about, but I love the line, I can learn to resist anything but temptation. I love that line right there. It just, I'm not going to explain what that means. It can mean different things to different people, but, it's a really deep line to say the least. And I always love that line. I love that wailing guitar riff, it just feels like Alex Lifeson is just pouring his soul into that solo, or that riff, I should say. And this was actually one of Alex Lifeson's favorite Rush songs, to be honest. He actually cited this as being one of his favorites, and I could definitely see that. And apparently, here's the thing, apparently they used to play this song acoustically, and it went down a lot better than the electric version that's presented here on the album. So maybe the acoustics version of the song is what a lot of fans resonate with. I have seen a few performances of it. It's fucking phenomenal. But I wouldn't say it's that much better than the one on the album. I don't know. That's just my opinion. You know what? There are some things on this song that kind of, if it was taken away, the song would have been even better. There's a lot of Geddy Lee scat singing again, where he goes, la, 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 like near the end of the song. And I think that kind of takes it down a notch, takes away a little bit of the heartfelt authenticity of it. But so I guess maybe live they would obviously eliminate that, and it would come across as more natural, more organic. But on the album they do keep that on, and it's slightly cheesy. But overall, Resist is one of the best songs on the album. Probably up there with honestly, I'd say Driven and Time in Motion are probably my two favorites. This is probably my third or fourth favorite on the album. So a very good song. I would definitely give this one at least an 8.5 out of 10, at least. So, amazing track. Next track on the album, we got Limbo, the instrumental. And earlier in the video, I might have been like a tad bit too harsh on this track. Sure, it's not one of the greatest Rush instrumentals, but it's definitely not a bad song, and it's definitely worth listening to. It's a pretty atmospheric track. Kind of feels like kind of matches the album cover. It feels like you're staring out into this vast snowy landscape, calling out for help or being trapped or something. It's a pretty ominous, pretty not a really ominous, but it's a haunting kind of song. But again, at the end of the day, I do feel that it's a bit overlong, coming in at about 6 minutes in length, and I feel like they could have like tapered that down a bit. The main riff of the track as well also isn't very memorable. This is a song you listen to a few times, and it's just in and out of your brain, and you kind of forget how it goes. Now, in the comments below, tell me if I'm wrong. Tell me if it's because I'm inexperienced with the album, because that could definitely be a factor, and hopefully that's not the case. But I have a funny feeling that a lot of people are going to agree with me that this is kind of a song that just comes and goes. I kind of like the atmospherics to it. It has some good keyboard sections. Geddy Lee does some pretty interesting things with his voice that kind of remind me of the intro of 2112. You know, where he's singing like later in the song, that kind of emotive, expansive vocal tone that Geddy Lee employs on this track. It gives it that haunting feel. But overall, I can't really find much to love about this track. It even has some like sound bites in the middle that kind of distract you a bit. But overall, it's a good song, and it's pretty dynamic. It's definitely more experimental than the one off Roll the Bones. Definitely like the one on Counterparts much better than this track. It's just, that's such a sexy song. But this one here, it's a decent addition to the Rush instrumental catalog. Just overall, just not a very memorable song for me. So I'm going to give Limbo, I'll give it a solid 8 out of 10. Maybe a 7.5 to an 8, but yeah, let's stick with an 8. It's a pretty good song, actually. Just not the most memorable.
Chip away the stone. Chip away the stone. Make the burden lighter. You must go that rock alone.
Alright guys, so we come to the last track on the album. Thank God. It was getting long. It was getting tedious. And it's called Carve Away the Stone. And this track here is just, I don't even know what to say about this song. Like, it's 4 minutes of just nothing. Like, nothing of interest happens in this song. I'm not going to bore you guys to tears describing, like, what happens. Well, I just said nothing happens. But you know what I mean. I'm not going to go through the song and say, well, first they play this part and then they play this part. There's no point. It's just a really, really boring, uninspired Rush song that, again, it's just in and out of your brain in like 2 seconds. Like, you hear this song and it's gone. I mean, the chorus itself is just, carve away the stone, carve away the stone, na 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 na. There's nothing there. Anyone could have written that. There's like a lame attempt at a guitar solo. Sorry, Alex Lifeson. It's just, one of my least favorite tracks on the album. It could have been on Presto. Like, you know, the song kind of has this poppy feel to it. Nothing really has any balls on this track. Could have easily have been like one of those later songs on Presto. It's just, not a good one for me. One of the worst tracks on the album. I'm not to like belabor the point. I'd probably give this one a 6.5 out of 10. It's a little better than Dog Years. I don't know. But then Dog Years has that kind of charm to it. That kind of comedic charm to it. So, I don't even know. But yeah. So, that's the last track on the album. And again, it's a very long album. I think it's about 55 minutes or so. Could have definitely taken away Carve Away the Stone, Dog Years. They could have trimmed down Virtuality a bit. Totem could have been totally taken off. Half the World could have totally been. So again, like 5 out of the 10 songs were just kind of mediocre Rush songs. The other 5 are pretty good. And again, those 4 that I mentioned, Test for Echo, Time in Motion, Driven, and Resist, definitely take those songs and put them on a playlist because they are fantastic. So I hope this album doesn't just go under the radar. You know, a lot of people are saying it's the worst Rush album, as I already mentioned multiple times. But that doesn't mean like you shouldn't listen to it, because you absolutely should. And take away those tracks and savor those songs and kind of like just throw away the rest. Okay, to be fair, Limbo's a pretty good track. Virtuality, other than the chorus, is pretty strong. And Half the World ain't that bad. But it's just, you know, nothing you want to just keep revisiting over and over again. So yeah, that's basically my review of Test for Echo. It's not my least favorite Rush album. I like it a bit better than Presto, but it's close. It's close. So thanks for watching, guys. Next up, we're gonna be talking about Vapor Trails from 2002, the first album of the 2000s, and really their big comeback album. So we're gonna talk a lot about that. I definitely got to listen to it a lot before we make that review, so it might be a while. But I remember it being a pretty decent album. One of my least favorite Rush albums. Not to give too much away, it's one of my least favorite. But I think I definitely liked it better than Test for Echo. Definitely better than Presto as well. So we'll see what happens. So we'll see you guys then. Thanks again for watching. I always appreciate it. And stay tuned. And of course, rest in peace to Neil Peart.